Nexus. The Crown Herald Town of Elisir. Ambassadorial District. Adventurers Guild Hall of Elisir. Guildmaster's Office. Local time 1935 hours. Emma. 5 plans have been drawn up, each one more ludicrous than the last, all of which were illustrated prominently on the blackboard the bat-like Thulvan had dragged in, the man well and truly living up to his bardic title. Everything from the dragon and its lair down to my armour, and in particular my helmet, was drawn with these super shaky lines. The style lended itself well to the dynamic movements and action-packed frames that accompanied each plan, resulting in the whole thing looking more like a storyboard for a science fantasy comic rather than anything even remotely resembling a proper battle plan. From the first plan, which required the introduction of more hostile beasts, to the last plan, which admittedly broke the pattern of outrageous brainstorming, there was definitely a lot of thought being put into these propositions. Though, admittedly, not a lot of practical gains could be extracted from them. Right, let's take it from the top, I began, letting out a slight exhale as I stepped up, standing next to, and towering a good few heads above Thulvan. Plan number 1. Calling upon a familiar or a horde of loaned familiars, I asked frankly, trying my best to hold back my disbelief.
Yes, my lady. You see, I believe that the best plan of attack is one where you needn't even be on the offensive,
the man beamed, taking on this car salesman-like persona, as he grinned as wide as his little maw could manage.
Why risk your own life when you can instead risk the life of your own frowls?
He began, though just as quickly shifted inwardly, immediately turning timid upon hearing the words that just came out of his own mouth. The glares from everyone present definitely hammered home the awkwardness of that unfortunate phrasing.
What I meant to say was, given the wildly dangerous nature of the dragon, it might be best to allow nature to take its course. Call upon beasts to fight the dragon, and in the process, a few crystals should be ripped out as collateral.
Thalmin was the first to voice his concerns at this plan, turning towards me just for a moment, as if to ask to speak on my behalf. With all due respect, adventurer, this plan lacks both guarantee and agency, he began, listing those 2 points by raising one finger after another. We lack any assurance that a crystal would even be knocked off the dragon for the former, and we are reduced to mere observers when it comes to the latter.
I apologize, mercenary prince.
The Batman bowed deeply in a show of apologetics.
I should have prefaced this by saying that this plan hedges on a mage with mastery over familiar summons, as I've seen plenty of Beastmaster managing to do a great many impossible things with their beasts, including directing them as if they were golems on a battlefield. I was hoping you could do the same, directing familiars to target the dragon's crystal specifically.
The pocket monster plan, I thought amusingly to myself. Well, we can immediately disregard it, Thalmin rebutted. We are neither tamers nor beastmasters.
Such a thing is far beneath our station,
Eleanor quickly added, as if to save face. This merely elicited some neutral blinks, and several nods, as I began pointing at the second, very questionable plan.
Ah yes, Plan 2,
the bard proclaimed brightly.
Illusions. Simply have a grand illusionist conjure up an attractive dragon to distract or potentially even... Stop!
The 4 of us shouted in unison, putting the idea down in its tracks.
I cannot believe you would even dare entertain such a debased idea in front of us,
Eleanor seethed, the man clearly more offended than anyone else present, given his mastery over illusion magic.
Very well, my lord.
Thulvan bowed deeply, simply moving his clawed hand down to point number 3.
Plan 3. We bait the dragon with food. Now, as we all know, amethyst dragons, like most other gem-based dragons, hunger not merely for meat, but for minerals.
He grinned, once more turning to Eleanor.
I believe you may know this best, my lord.
The Venerian didn't reply, merely glaring deep into the man's soul, causing him to flinch.
The idea is simple. We bait the dragon, and then, while it's distracted, I will not sacrifice my precious jewels for such a flight of fancy.
Eleanor cut the man off before turning towards me.
I must make this clear, Cadet Emma Booker. You will not be using my precious jewels as if they were worms on a hook.
Yeah, there's no need to waste your breath there, Eleanor. The bait idea is just too risky, I think, I offered, prompting the Batman to move on to the fourth point on the list.
Plan 4 it is,
he spoke brightly, before pointing at the convoluted setup that would have made even the looniest of toons seem tame by comparison.
We attack from below. With some clever mathematics and subterranean expertise, we dig a hole directly underneath the dragon where it sleeps.
My eyes followed the diagram behind the man, as it detailed a funny little doodle of what was clearly Sim, tunneling through to the cave and then chiseling out a small hole beneath a sleeping dragon.
Following which we quickly procure ourselves one of its gems, and then escape down the small tunnel we came from.
At which point we might as well be running headfirst into the dragon, Thalming growled out. Do you honestly believe the dragon wouldn't simply rise upon feeling one of its gems being chiseled out?
I was hoping someone could potentially utilize a spell with which to knock the dragon out.
I am afraid you overestimate our current capabilities, adventurer, Thacia interjected this time around. Such a task requires a mage with skills far beyond the caliber of first years. A dragon's mind, despite his bestial nature, is after all quite difficult to influence.
Understood, Your Royal Highness,
Thorvan acknowledged, before moving on to what was probably the most practical idea.
Plan 5. We simply walk around the forests until we find ourselves a crystal. Considering how many engagements the dragon has had with men-at-arms and local beasts, I assume that at least one crystal fragment can be found somewhere.
The man muttered out, as if he was about ready to give up. Time-consuming, but probably the most reasonable plan out of all of them, Thalming concurred, nodding with closed eyes, miming the movements of both the Guildmaster and Sim.
Why does it always have to be the least exciting one?
Thorvan mumbled to himself before sitting back down.
I must warn you, considering the size of the forest, this particular plan may take quite a while to accomplish.
Moreover, it still relies on chance rather than any form of assuredness, Thalming quickly added.
Exactly.
The man beamed back with a sudden burst of confidence, though he just as quickly reeled himself back in upon locking eyes with the Lupinor.
My lord,
he promptly added. In any case, I believe this should conclude our consultation, I offered, turning to the magical clock at the far end of the room, as Sarasar's cautious warnings were still fresh on my mind. I appreciate the creativity on display here, Adventurer Thorvan, I offered politely, causing the bard to puff off his chest in response.
Thank you, my lady.
Though considering everything you've been through, I believe all of you deserve a well-earned rest, so I won't be taking much more of your time. I concluded diplomatically, gesturing for Eleanor to hand over the sack of gold. As promised, your payment. I spared no time whilst savouring the moment to untie the top of the sack, allowing it to drop with a satisfying clinky thud onto the table in front of us. Gold coins practically spilled from the top following that stunt, forming a respectable pile which caught the full and undivided attention of both kobolds present, deluxe and otherwise, along with Thorvan. I've always wanted to do that, I muttered to myself under a muted microphone. What happened next was a brief tallying of the gold coins in front of Piamon, followed shortly by the arrival of the receptionist, who began sorting the coins through what I could only describe as an old-timey coin sorter. Genuine and up-to-date, Master Piamon, the elf announced politely, before nodding and leaving the room just as abruptly as she'd arrived.
Right then,
the slime began, as he turned towards both me and Sim.
Quest giver, adventurers, are there any points of contention either party would wish to raise?
My eyes locked with Sim's, as we both turned towards the slime and spoke in unison. No, Guildmaster.
Quest giver?
Piamon focused on me this time around.
Do you find all the terms of the contract have been fulfilled and upheld?
Yes, I nodded.
Adventurers.
Piamon quickly turned towards Sim.
Do you wish to raise any issues with the compensation of your labor?
No, Guildmaster. The dwarf bowed.
Well then, considering all parties are satisfied, I hereby proclaim this quest.
The slime paused as he jumped up towards one of the cabinets, grabbing a stamp before careening back down onto his desk at significant speeds, slamming the quest contract with a satisfying thud.
Complete!
He announced vibrantly, holding up the contract with a single slime tendril, pointing at a wax seal stamp of his own slime form, now fixed onto the parchment.
This particular quest will be filed into my personal vault. So, following your departure, none of us shall speak of this quest unless all are present in front of this contract.
We all bowed at that and began shuffling out of the room wordlessly. With one party now primed with information, and the other now loaded with the fruits of Eleanor's impromptu sports betting ventures. However, I couldn't stay entirely silent while we made our way down the stairs, as I turned towards Sim with a smile beneath my helmet. You know, I was wondering if there's a way we could stay in touch, just in case I require your services again. The man turned towards me, but while I could make out a warm expression, I couldn't really tell if he was smiling beneath both his beard and moustache. He quickly reached for one of his pouches, grabbing what appeared to be a business card in the process. Aye, though unlike other adventurers, we don't necessarily have a base of operations, so...
Our previous base was repossessed, along with our wagon, but all that might just change because of your...
Thorvan muttered out, only to be shot down with a stern glare from Sim.
Sorry, he apologized meekly.
Our company is currently based out of this guild hall. However, if things do change... The dwarf paused, turning to shoot the Batman another glare. I will leave a note with the receptionist as to our new lodgings. Thank you, Sim. The pleasure is all mine, Cadet Imabuka. We parted ways on the second floor, with Sim and his gang entering a door marked with a brass and wood sign, engraved with the words, Adventurers Only. A few barely contained cheers and the distinctive clinking of gold coins quickly arrived shortly thereafter, very much audible even behind closed doors, marking the end of Sim's adventure, but ushering in the start of my own. Our departure from the Guildhall was certainly a bit different this time around, however, as there were more than a couple of eyes watching our every move while we made our way through the lobby. Garner, Loris, and a whole host of unnamed adventurer trainees kept their eyes on us through the main dining hall, prompting me to give them all a passing wave. I was rewarded with distant thank yous and a few cheers as a result, which prompted Eleanor to eventually ask me something unexpected, just as we left the Guildhall proper.
While I understand your bonus to Sim and his sorry troop, I do not understand your proclivities for charity when it comes to these trainee adventurers, Cadet Imabuka,
Eleanor announced, as I began grabbing hold of what was left of his shopping bags from the trolley.
Charity for the sake of building connections, forging a face, and investing in future alliances is a smart long-term strategy. However, I doubt you'll be making the Nexus your next home, let alone Elisir, so I do not see the purpose in your charitable investments.
That's precisely the issue, Eleanor, I sighed out. I don't see it as an investment. I'm not doing it in order to create nor save face. Heck, it's not even a public outreach thing, I shrugged. Though I'd be lying if it wasn't something that fell under the Hearts and Minds handbook of PsyOps soft power pointers. I just felt like I wanted to offer those kids something they probably don't get too much of.
So, it's selfishness then?
Eleanor surmised, sucker punching me with that out-of-left-field response.
You said it yourself, Imabuka. You merely felt like doing it. Perhaps to assuage some deep-seated desire to be seen as a savior. Or perhaps a benefactor.
The fact you'd immediately jump to that conclusion says more about you than me, Eleanor. And that's where I'm going to leave it, I stated plainly, prompting the Venerian to simply shrug as we made our way towards the academy. Nexus. The Crown Herald town of Elasir, en route to the Transgression Academy for the Magical Arts. Gondola Express. Local time, 2000 hours. Emma. Something had compelled us to take a brief change of scenery. Perhaps it was a desire to simply sit down after an entire evening's worth of shopping around town. Or perhaps it was a pressing urgency to immediately dig into the logistical issues that came with what I was quickly dubbing the Dragon Quest. I think we're all in agreement here when I say we definitely need a plan that's more solid than just roaming around the forests until we find a stray crystal, I began, right after Thacia had established the privacy screen, gesticulating wildly the moment the gondola began moving upwards.
That consultation left a lot to be desired, so I can most certainly concur, Emma.
Thalmin growled back in acknowledgement. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to do a whole sweep of the forest, that much I can agree with, I continued. So that's probably the first thing we'll do. But honestly, that falls under standard operational protocol anyways.
Mapping out the terrain utilizing your drones, Emma?
Thalmin shot back. Correct. So spotting an errant crystal probably won't be too hard, especially if I get my info drones to supplement my standard recon drones' operational capacity. I shrugged. But in any case, we should think of a fallback plan, in case we come up with nothing. Thalmin paused, cradling his snout as he looked out of the gondola, deep in thought. The darkness here truly was dark, with only the town illuminating the world around it. Though if I were to squint a bit, I could actually make out a few of the main roads leading out of town, snaking through the idyllic countryside like orange and yellow fluorescent veins, pulsating with whatever magical fire was inside the lanterns that lined them.
We could slay it,
the Wolf Prince spoke abruptly, garnering everyone's attention. A brief lock of our eyes, however, prompted the man to simply sigh and shrug.
Though it is understandable that you wouldn't wish to go that far, he conceded.
I won't say it's completely out of the question, Thalmin, I acknowledged begrudgingly. The mission is vital. However, I'd rather we not antagonize a creature that's already gone through literal hell. I can only imagine the sorts of things it's been through down in the life archives. I visibly shuddered.
An honourable notion,
Thalmin spoke firmly with a single dip of his head.
Though I must stress something, Emma, he quickly added, his tone growing increasingly severe. If it comes to the point where slaying it is the only assured path towards accomplishing your mission, then we must be decisive.
His eyes narrowed, something burning hot behind those amber pupils.
There could be no hesitation,
he emphasized sternly, pressing me on my admittedly timid concession. If we reach a point where all non-lethal options are exhausted, then of course, Thalmin, I conceded, finally drawing out a firm nod from the wolf.
Very well, then let us discuss our options.
We prattled on for a solid 5 minutes, throwing everything in the kitchen sink at the proverbial idea wall to see what actually stuck. By the end of it, however, we managed to come up with something that was at least somewhat respectable. A plan that was both simple and straightforward, yet fraught with just as many unknowns as one of Thulvan's harebrained schemes.
You're certain your weapon will be able to shear through one of its crystals?
Thalmin inquired skeptically. Yeah. The science team back home has had experience with cutting one of its crystals in half, remember? That means I can guesstimate just how much force will be needed to crack it. The Lupanor Prince's eyes quickly shifted to my hip, or more accurately, the weapon held within its magnetic holster.
I admit your bullets are quite formidable, but I highly doubt that they will be sufficient to inflict the necessary damage, Emma.
Oh, you're definitely right on the money there, Thalmin, I confessed, for a barely restrained grin. Though, thankfully, I'm packing much more heat than that old thing. I continued cryptically, moving my eyeballs to authorize the next few motions. My heart filled with an untamable giddiness as soon as I heard the EV replying with 3 arming tones. This prompted me to raise my left arm up in a swift vertical motion, balling my hand into a fist as the panels on the suit's forearm separated and receded with two satisfying ka-chunks. The weapon's deployment came as quickly as I'd moved my arm into the standard arming motion, accompanied by the soft and barely audible whirring of motors, and serenaded by the ominous and otherworldly thrums of surging energy. Blink once and you'd miss the vertical deployment of the base of the weapon, a thick, solid, composite platform that held atop of it an unassuming rectangular bar of metal, about half the width of the suit's forearm. Blink twice, and you'd miss the horizontal expansion of the weapon, a solid rectangular tube rapidly unfolded, snapping and extending upwards towards my fist in what I could only describe as a cross between the telescopic motions of an accordion and a spyglass, with the former analogy being bizarrely more accurate, as thick fabric-like membranes covered much of what would otherwise be telescoping joints, where dust and debris could easily infiltrate, resulting in a gun that more resembled one of those ancient folding bellows cameras. Blink thrice, and that'd probably be the last time you close your eyes. Though, thankfully, the gang would have the pleasure of surviving the 5 seconds to kill battle drill that all power armored specialists has seared into their muscle memory. I was reminded of the few times Auntie Ran sometimes even pulled that fist-up motion out of reflex whenever she got spooked. Thowin's eyes widened with both curiosity and excitement, his pupils fixated on the sheer length of the weapon's barrel that had extended a good ways past my fist. Thacia, on the other hand, inspected the accordion-like fabric between each successive section of the barrel carefully, as if trying to make out its drastically divergent aesthetic from the rest of my weapons and equipment so far. It was Eleanor, however, who raised a brow, his head cocking as he noticed the various patterns and etching on said fabric. The man eventually landed on a conclusion I was honestly surprised to hear.
These are to dissipate the heat generated by whatever foul forces are at play within this construct, I presume?
My mouth hung agape at that, something that the Venerian seemed to pick up on, even through the armor.
Do not take me for a fool, Cadet Immabuka. You would be wise to recall the nature of my realm, yes? A realm of great heat naturally calls for a means to dispel it. And whilst magic is used for the most part, I am not ignorant to the pre-contemporary means of dispelling it.
The man shrugged. Right, I acknowledged, meeting the Venerian's eyes before shifting over to Thalman's with a wide and expressive grin. Well, I've run the numbers, and if the data I have on the crystal is anything to go by, then I can confirm that this is what'll do the job. I practically cackled out. The Mark 7 Type 22 variant, Model 2777 Compact Rail Accelerator, or as T-Sec power armored specialists like to call it, the accordion gun. With a flex of my hand, the heat-dissipating fabric came to settle along the gun's telescopic joints. The expeditionary version with the upgraded capacitors and filled strippable collapsible radiators, if I might add, a rather vintage model to pair with the power armor, definitely giving off intrasolar Eva suit vibes with its external fabric components. I trailed off, cutting myself off before I began geeking out about this fine piece of military hardware. But yes, while the moon gun is definitely out of its league when it comes to its piercing power. I paused, slapping the weapon holster by my hip for emphasis. This bad boy definitely won't have the same problem going straight through the dragon's crystals. I gestured towards the unprimed weapon pridefully, all the while making sure it wasn't pointed at anything I didn't want at the end of the barrel, as per basic safety protocol. Speaking of which, I quickly collapsed the whole thing back into its forearm compartment, causing all three present to merely glance at one another in varying levels of concern. I will not mention Academy regulations when it comes to non-ceremonial weapons, Emma, Thacia muttered out. Nor will I delve further into the inner workings of that weapon for the sake of staving your unending rambles on such niche matters. Hey, what they don't know won't hurt them. Besides, between you and me, this is merely a tool. A heavy demolition tool or a particularly heavy-duty deconstruction tool for my equipment. I winked, garnering an uninterrupted 2-second sigh from Thacia. Go on. She gestured dismissively towards both me and Thalmin. You'll definitely have to give me a personal demonstration of that artifice sometime later, Emma. Thalmin began, with a wide and fanged grin, only to be shot down just as quickly by Thacia. Just so I can personally gauge its efficacy against the amethyst dragon's crystals. Nothing more, he quickly added, raising both of his hands in the process. In any case, if your weapon is indeed up to such a task, the next problem I foresee is how we proceed after we extract said crystal, he offered. Because as it stands right now, we're treating the dragon as if it were a null actor. Our current plans fail to take into account exactly how we should contend with the dragon following a successful long-range extraction. Yeah, you do raise a very good point there. I mean, sniping the dragon from afar before sending one of the drones in to retrieve the crystal is still the most solid and minimally invasive way of going about it, I think. However, it's actually evading an angry dragon out for revenge that's the problem, I admitted. I don't suppose you'll be willing to sacrifice more of your drones as bait to distract the dragon while we retrieve the crystal? I'd rather we not be too frivolous with mission-pertinent resources, Thalmin. But we can definitely try the distraction plan with something else. I'm actually liking that now, actually. I could feel the cogs in our collective heads turning now, as the minor kinks in the plan were ironed out, or at least as ironed out as they could be on this gondola ride trip. There were definitely still a lot of variables that needed to be accounted for. Variables that Thacia would eventually be more than happy to indulge in as we continued the conversation through the halls within a privacy screen, up until we finally reached our room. Dragon's Heart Tower, Level 23, Residence 30. Living Room. Local time 2100 hours. Emma. I am happy to see the both of you so enthusiastic about this endeavour, the princess began, just as the door closed behind us. And while I hate to be the tether to pull a pair of soarers back down to ground, I am afraid there are matters of logistics which must be discussed. That one word managed to capture both of our attentions as we sat down, while Eleanor began opening up bags upon bags of still piping hot snacks. Tell me, you don't happen to believe this mission will be completed in a mere weekend now, do you? Thacia questioned. A collective silence rang out as that question's only response, prompting the princess to continue unabated. I need not remind you of our current place within the Nexus and what responsibilities we are beholden to as students in one of its most prestigious academies. I think both of you understand the degree of scrutiny we will all be put under should any of us fail to attend a single class for reasons other than sickness or mere academic dishonesty.
We are already in deep and murky waters as is,
Eleanor quickly chimed in, taking a bite out of a piece of pastry.
Moreover, I'm sure you're about to broach a second, but easily just as vital a topic, aren't you, princess?
Thacia nodded, before relaying Eleanor's second concern to us. Secondly, we must discuss the distances involved in your journey to the North Rithian forests, for there are functional limitations when it comes to the use of the transportium network. I blinked at that second point, turning to Eleanor expectantly. I assumed you'd be the one taking us there, Eleanor?
And there we go with your presumptuousness, Cadet Emma Booker, the man sighed out. Putting my personal reservations about this whole debacle aside, I simply cannot take you there by virtue of it being a practical impossibility.
I cocked my head at this. And why not? I thought Sim made it pretty clear that Nexian nobles are...
Nexian nobles are allowed this privilege, yes,
the deluxe kobold interjected, waiting for me to grasp his meaning. It took me only a second to get it. So you're saying only you are able to go through, no questions asked?
Precisely, Cadet Emma Booker.
But that doesn't make any sense. I assume nobles don't just go on strolls through the transportium alone. Like, there's obviously going to be attendants, servants, security, and so on and so forth. What about...
Your ability to grasp yet fumble such simple logical assertions never fails to amuse me, Earthroamer,
Eleanor chided, with his signature smug and puntable grin.
You see, you are correct. Nobles will almost always have some form of retinue. However, it is the nature of these retainers that allows them access through the transportium.
I paused, my eyes growing wide as I thought back to Reela. They're officially part of your party, legally and bound by contract then. That's what allows them to go through with you.
Precisely, Cadet Emma Booker.
The Venerian nodded politely.
Moreover, there is a long and frankly frustrating process of obtaining approval for such a warrant, which is typically fine for most situations.
Eleanor paused before looking at Thalman and I up and down.
But not for our particular circumstances.
We're also adjacent realmers, Emma, Thacia added with a sigh. And with how much scrutiny you're under, it is unlikely that we will be able to proceed in that particular direction. I grimaced at that, letting out a deep sigh only to cling on to Thacia's final few words. Wait, you said this particular direction. Are you saying there's another way? This piqued Thalman's interest, though not necessarily Eleanor's.
The course syllabus might not have fully expanded on this for reasons of academy intrigue. However, it is widely known that there exists a series of quests which the academy occasionally issues to students, granting the prospective quest taker temporary access to the wider nexus and, in turn, access to its transportium network. These quests are infrequently frequent,
Eleanor quickly chimed in.
With the first of which coincidentally poised to be announced tomorrow in Professor Belnor's class.
The cogs in my brain started spinning into overdrive now, as I turned to both Eleanor and Thacia with an expectant gaze. And since this is an Academy-issued quest, this will address both of our logistical issues, both the absence thing and our access to the transportium network. Precisely, Emma, Thacia acknowledged, though she was quickly overtaken by a somewhat deflated Eleanor.
If this entire debacle had taken place prior to my disillusionment with the Black Robe Professor Station, then I would have taken this as an opportunity to leap forward into the fray of class sovereignship.
The man quickly sighed, placing the back of his hand atop his forehead in a display that practically screamed, "Woe is me."
Alas, such ventures are now more of a liability than a boon.
Right, I sighed in acknowledgement. Okay, well, I guess that's sorted. My eyes shifted sharply towards the window, focusing in on the lit-up roads over in the distance. Thacia, rather coincidentally, decided to bring up the next point currently brewing in my head. Though even with the transportium, there is still the matter of your own means of conveyance, Emma, she began. It took Sim an entire day's travel to reach the forest on both enchanted steeds and monotreaders. Considering your predispositions and your inability to utilize enchanted artifices, I don't suppose the speed you've demonstrated in physical education can be sustained for the entire journey to the forests. This question prompted a smile to form at the edges of my face, as my eyes quickly shifted up my HUD towards one of the many projects I've been lining up for the Dragon Quest. While I think I could hoof it, I believe I have better options I can consider. I began with a sly chuckle. Evie? Yes, Cadet Booker. Getting the MV printed out might be a bit too ambitious given our time crunch, so how about we print out the Martian Opportunity? Acknowledged. Assessing available materials. Stand by. Assessment complete. Available materials sufficient for designated project. Allocating materials and resources. Stand by to feed listed materials into the printer. New project designated. Printing and assembly of the Adaptive Terrain Two-Wheeled Vehicle, 82WV. Model, Martian Opportunity, V4C. I tapped my foot in excitement, while my mind absolutely buzzed, my imagination conjuring up vivid mental images, that juxtaposed the pinnacle of classic motorbike design with the anachronisms of a fantasy world. The harsh curves, uncompromising practicality, and sheer bulk of Martian automotive engineering, a workhorse that has seen service from the Martian Badlands all the way to the Keplerian frontier, clashing hard against the opulence and 18th century flair of Nexian extravagance. However, before my excitement could ascend to new heights, I was once again brought down to earth by the whiny shrills of a certain deluxe kobold.
Other options? Your heft and weight bar you from most, if not all, mounts, save for those bred for cargo, while your mannerless predispositions prevent you from partaking in enchanted conveyances. So tell me, what options is it you speak of? Because as it stands, your only means of transport is by the power of your own 2 legs.
The man paused, reaching for his forehead, feigning a look of startled realization.
Or is it? Perhaps this so-called alternative isn't a conveyance nor steed, but the revelation that you yourself are the steed.
What are you getting at here, Eleanor? I sighed out in frustration.
Only the possibility that you may be leading up to yet another revelation. One which fits more in line with your demonstration in physical education, rather than those impressive feats as seen on your sightseer. In essence, given your travails in the former, I am postulating that there may be more to your kind's aptitude for long-distance running. Perhaps you will soon reveal your more beastly traits of the quadrupedal variety, all for the sake of overcoming your lack of conveyances, of course.
I allowed those words to hang in the air for a few moments, eyeing Eleanor with a tired look of incredulity, hidden away by the helmet.
Well, Frommer, what do you... Click.
With one swift motion, I unlatched the data tab from its holster. You're right about one thing, Eleanor, I began with a renewed vigour. What I'm about to reveal is considered by most in my realm to be quite beastly indeed. The man's cocksure grin grew, if only for a moment. But the beast in question isn't yours truly, no. Instead, it's a lovely piece of engineering that is, by all definitions, a beast in its own right. I grinned widely, as the tablet generated a hologram right on cue. All eyes now landed on the rotating projection of the V4C, the pride of Martian engineering and the poster child of Martian exceptionalism.